And so here we are at the UN today with a big debate over what Israel just did. And what's your understanding of the significance, Aaron, of the strike on the Iranian diplomatic facility?
Well, it looks like they're trying to drag the U.S. into a war.
Yeah.
Why else would you attack the Iranian embassy in Damascus except to provoke a reaction from Iran and its allies, and try, which could trigger a war? And why they want to draw the U.S. in is because I don't think Israel wants to fight Hezbollah, Iran's ally, on its own, because Hezbollah can do damage to Israel. It showed that the last time Israel tried to fight Hezbollah in a major way in 2006. And so Israel knows that to defeat Hezbollah, which it wants to do because it hates anybody who dares resist its occupation and hegemony, that they need the U.S. to do that. So therefore, I think the thinking in Israel is if you can sufficiently provoke Iran and its allies, then that will force the U.S. to come in to back Israel up, as Biden has shown every indication so far that he would. Remember, after October 7th, what was his response? He sent in aircraft carriers into the region to back Israel up. And so
Yeah.
I think Israel is trying to cash that chip,
Yep.
and get a war going. That's the
Expand the
only
war.
explanation I can. Yeah. That's the only explanation that I have for doing this, because it's routine for them to bomb Syria, and everybody lets them do that, including Russia, by the way, which I've never quite understood why Russia would let its ally Syria be bombed regularly by Israel. So that's been normalized. And Israel's bombed airports, Damascus, Aleppo multiple times. It bombed Aleppo just a few days ago, killed many people. But this going after a embassy is next level. That's the rules-based international order in action.
Yeah, we make the rules, you follow the orders. It's a replacement of the international order that was designed to prevent another genocide coming out of World War II, that came out of the Nuremberg trials. Remember, the Nazi war criminals put on trial in Nuremberg, many of those who faced hanging, were not put on trial for genocide. They were put on trial for war crimes, for just simple criminal atrocities carried out on the battlefield. So the Nuremberg sets the stage for anybody to be held accountable. It's not just about genocide or the Holocaust. And you're right. This attack is not about deterrence. It's not about deterring Iran. It's about drawing Iran in deeper. Iran has a clear strategy. It wasn't notified about October 7th or the Al-Aqsa flood operation. It came as a surprise. U.S. intelligence issued a declassified report determining that. Hezbollah didn't know either. That's partly why the attack was so successful, is they did not notify their allies. Most people in Hamas didn't know. Hamas spokesman Bassem Naim recently told Al Jazeera he had no idea it was happening. And the political wing all gathered together and prayed because they were so surprised. And so since then, Hezbollah and Iran have been engaged in a strategy that balances confrontation with Israel with caution, to not take it too far, to not sacrifice all of Beirut to the full wrath of the Israeli military, while continuing to push Israel back off the northern border and try to maintain a 1-to-1 ratio of lost soldiers on each side. Iran is, hung back, and they've even apparently caused some of the militias, the popular mobilization units in Iraq, to actually stand down with their attacks on U.S. facilities. And Israel wants that dynamic to change in order to fulfill the dream of Netanyahu. His biggest dream, his meaning as prime minister, is to drag the U.S. into a war with Iran. That's what it's all about. So, and it's not going to work. I don't think that's going to work. They're not going to stray from their path, the resistance axis. But here is the kind of disrespect that Israel is showing to the U.S. with these kinds of brazen violations of international law.
The Pentagon's assessment that this was an Israeli strike. Have you all been in touch with the Israelis about this?
We were not notified before the strike occurred. We have been engaged with them at different levels, but again, this was not a U.S. military strike, so I don't have a lot of the details on it.
You have been engaging with them after the fact to discuss specifically their attack on this building in Damascus.
We have engaged with them on various different levels, not to mention some of the questions about the humanitarian aid workers that were also killed in the strike in Gaza.
So the U.S. was not notified. Do you believe that?
That's a great question. I don't actually believe that, but then again, with Israel, like, you never know. Maybe they are so brazen and entitled that they would just go ahead and do this without informing the Biden administration. But certainly, whether they were informed or not, Biden's given them the green light to do whatever they want, by never imposing any consequences and by continuing to supply them with weapons. You know, going around Congress at least twice to waive congressional notification, these waivers that the Biden administration has invoked to just basically rush weapons to Israel, hiding these transfers from the public, pretending, as John Kirby said before, that Israel's not violating any international law. So if you're Israel, I mean, I think it's fair to assume that if you do this, you're not going to suffer any consequences from Biden if you don't inform him beforehand.
Yeah. However, that's just the Pentagon. So there are other branches of the national security state that may have known. And we have this article, I think you tweeted about it, in the Wall Street Journal about concern in Congress over U.S. and Israel's unprecedented intelligence sharing. As deaths mount in Gaza, some question whether American-provided information is adding to the humanitarian crisis. And this makes total sense. I mean, in the past, the NSA has provided Israel with access to its satellites to do targeting, for example, the Second Lebanon War in 2006. It's hard to imagine that they're not providing them with targeting assistance through advanced satellite capability.
Absolutely, especially given this is from the Wall Street Journal in June 2022. U.S. secretly reviews Israel's plans for strikes against Iranian targets in Syria. So,
Bam.
yeah, so, there's a long record of this. If you read this article in the Journal by Michael R. Gordon, who was involved, by the way, in the Iraq WMD scam when he was at the New York Times, he's very well connected with the national security state. It's clear from this article that every single Israeli strike in Syria, especially against a purported Iran target, is a joint U.S.-Israeli-U.S. strike, that the U.S. reviews every single strike and approves targeting, similar to what the U.S. does with Ukraine when it's targeting Russia. So that's why I'd be surprised if the U.S. wasn't involved in this one. But again, with Israel, you never know with these people because they're so entitled, they're so crazy that sometimes they might do something that even they haven't been given permission to by the U.S.
They're pushing the line. They're pushing the boundaries further than we've ever seen them do.
Yeah.
And at the United Nations during this extremely intense debate where every nation, including the UK, was issuing everything from deep concern to condemnation about Israel's violation of international law and striking this diplomatic facility. The U.S. stepped forward to issue a full-throated endorsement of what Israel did, speculating that Iran was harboring terrorists inside its embassy. So the U.S. is just, whether they were notified or not, they're on board now. So get ready for more. The question is, what do Iran and its allies do to deter future attacks? Because the Syrian state and military are at a weak point. There's no disputing that. They can't respond directly. I've seen video and statistics provided by the Syrian government of the so-called rebels backed by the CIA and the Gulf states, Turkey, systematically destroying surface-to-air missile batteries starting in 2013 all the way throughout the dirty war. And they reduced Syria's anti-aircraft capacity by like 50%. Now,
Mm.
much of that has been restored, but it just gives you a sense of how there was a deliberate and systematic plan to weaken Syria's ability to deter these kinds of attacks.
Yeah, and, you know, on that point, after the recent Israeli strike on Aleppo, where they killed a lot of people, including civilians, I saw reports coming from Syria. I didn't look too closely into them, so maybe they're not confirmed, but from sources I reliably trust, that immediately after Israel struck Aleppo, then you had so-called rebels in Idlib, which is the last so-called rebel-controlled province controlled by Al Qaeda. They launched strikes on Aleppo as well, which to some people gave the appearance that basically these rebels were working, if not overtly with Israel, at least tacitly, that they were cooperating in that way. So in that respect, it's ongoing. And by the way, it's worth pointing out here, as we've talked a lot about it, the Grayzone, Israel armed these rebels, treated them in hospitals, paid their salaries. Israel was a huge part of the coalition that waged the decade-long dirty war in Syria. And you can see why. They were trying to weaken a state that is central to the resistance axis. And they've succeeded in large part, and they're continuing.
Yep. Idlib itself is a NATO carve-out in Syria, which the Syrian army needs to confront. So the only thing they can do is continue to host these elements on their soil, provide them with support. After Israel supported ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the Golan, the non-occupied part of Syria, of the Syrian Golan, providing them with weapons, logistics, hospital services, and then evacuating the Al-Qaeda affiliated white helmets. So Israel's just kind of coasting on the idea that it can continue to provoke escalation and it will not face a furious response. But I think once Iran is drawn in, if that happens, it's not going to exactly be a cakewalk for Israel. Its society is much weaker than Iran's or Syria's, whose people have nowhere else to go. And
they're actually indigenous to that land, and they're fighting for something.
Yeah.
You know, they're fighting for their survival, whereas Israel is just fighting for its hegemony.
Yeah.
And that creates a much different dynamic. And yeah, as you point out, a lot of Israelis have other passports to other countries, to Western countries that they can go to. That's not an option for most other people in that region.
Yeah.